Hello, everybody. Have you ever wondered if you actually own your home? You probably haven't wondered about that. You bought it, you went to a closing, you bought the home, and you live in it. But how do you know it's really yours? Well, I'm going to be talking about title insurance and more with Michael Haltman from Hallmark Abstract. He's an expert in this topic, and we're going to explore a lot of things, I gather, based on our preliminary discussion right before we went live. But we're going to start with that. So here goes. Hello,
That
Mike.
sounds great, Diane.
So, title insurance. Huh? How do you know if you really own your own home?
Well, and there's a lot of talk these days. First, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. How do you know that you really own your own home? Well, number one, you're trusting your attorney, he's your expert, he's your guide through the transaction. But what really ensures that you own good, clean, clear title is the title insurance. And that's protecting you, the buyer, in what's probably going to be one of the largest financial commitments that you ever make. And what the title insurance does, unlike a lot of insurance that is forward looking, you get life insurance because ultimately you will die, health insurance because hopefully you don't, but you may get sick, car insurance for an accident that may happen. But title insurance is looking back and protecting you against anything in the past before you close on that house. It's protecting and making sure that everything has been vetted, cleaned up if there were any issues in the past, whether it's an unpaid mortgage, whether there's a lien on the house that you didn't know existed. A lot of times, particularly on Long Island, so we specialize in New York title insurance, but on Long Island, you get a lot of what's known as a boundary line dispute, where your neighbor may have their fence may encroach on your property. And before you buy that property, you want to make sure that that issue is dealt with. And, what we always like to say is there are easy ways to take care of issues, and there are the right ways, which are the Hallmark abstract way. So you can have the neighbor sign an affidavit, which is great, that they acknowledge that that property is not theirs. Or you can have them sign a boundary line agreement, which gets recorded, so it's there for it's there, and it's good for whoever owns the house if you ultimately do sell it. The affidavit's only as good as the neighbor stays in their house. Once they move, the issue comes up again. So we go back and we make sure that before you buy that house, that every issue has been dealt with, and that indeed you are buying good, clean, clear title to the house and it's yours. The title insurance protects you if in the future something comes up and somebody comes in. Let's say you were buying the house from an estate and a third heir comes up. You thought there were only, or your lawyer was told that there were only two heirs, and those two heirs agreed to sell. But a third one pops in and says, I have the right to not have sold. And that creates a dispute where you as the owner could lose the house, but your title insurance protects you and covers you and will pay you whatever that value is. So,
Is
really,
it an occurrence that someone can get title insurance and then it actually kicks in? Or is it more like a peace of mind thing so you can sleep better at night?
it's more like a peace of mind thing. So it's like a tuxedo where you wear a belt and suspenders. But it is necessary. So if you're getting a mortgage, if you're buying a house with a mortgage, the mortgage company will mandate that you get title insurance because the house is their collateral. At the same time, I would say 99.9% of people get a owner's policy. And if they choose not to get an owner's policy, because they can do that, their lawyer will make them sign an affidavit that he recommended that they do get title insurance. So, how often two claims occur? Not that often. But again, as you said, you're buying peace of mind. And what's that worth for your home?
How do How do you go about searching a property?
So in New York in particular, the towns are, it's not like there's one data bank of information. If you're in New York City, you have to go to the New York City. It's a tool called Acris, and you go in there, and we hire outside people who go in and search the records. So if you're buying something in Nassau County, they have their county clerk's office, and the search is done in Nassau County. If you're buying in Suffolk County, then in Nassau County, every town has its own clerk. So you have to hire professionals who accumulate the information. We get That's where the abstract comes in. We receive a lot of information, which we then analyze and turn into ultimately a title insurance policy. But one of the things I tell people is that when you're buying a house, you will get a title insurance policy at the closing. But it's
Mhm.
important to know what goes into that title insurance policy because, as I mentioned with the boundary line agreement, there are different ways to handle things. You got to make sure everything is done. We cross all our T's, dot all our I's, because while we get a lot of deals from attorneys, our client is the buyer, and that's who we protect.
Now, you talked about on Long Island or more rural and other possibly rural areas where it's border lines of property, where fences might go up and things like that. In New York City or a place like a city, are you looking to see like who has the air rights in the building or who has, the rights to put a building right up next to your building? Does any of that fall under title insurance?
Well, sure. I mean, you have to make sure that zoning, that everything, all the approvals are in. Yeah. If someone, you can buy and sell air rights. You can,
Mhm. Yeah.
on an individual apartment, it's a little bit different, but if it's an entire building, then you do have to look through everything and make sure that the building is where it should be and is supposed to be, that it doesn't violate any any boundary issues. You have to just make sure you got to dig into all the details within that building.
When you do title insurance, are you looking to see like the chronological order of who owned it, owned the property in the past? Like, are you looking for
Chain of title.
tax liens or like what all falls under what you search? I'm curious.
Well, you're certainly looking for tax liens. You're
Mhm.
looking for anything that might be encumbering the property financially. But you are looking at the chain of title. You're looking at covenants and restrictions. Are there any things that a new owner can do that they can't do, that
Mhm.
the town says, you can't do that? Then you hear that sometimes with HOAs, homeowners associations, where you can't fly a certain flag, where you can't paint your house a certain color.
And you would
Those are
find that that would be part of title insurance?
not necessarily, but I mean, those are some of the things. So in a deed, you will sometimes have covenants and restrictions, which for a specific area will tell you things you can do and things you can't do. And, there's not always covenants and restrictions, but it does occur, and you need to be very sure that everything that the owner to be is very much aware of everything that purchase entails. That it's not always as black and white. Some closings are very easy and simple. Some take a little more digging.
Do people look at title insurance only when they're about to purchase a property or at any other times in their life?
Well, when you close on your home or your property, you get a title insurance policy. You should put it into a safe deposit box because at some point in the future, I bought my house in 1994. I've never looked at the title insurance because I've never had an issue. But, if somebody gets a knock on the door and it's like, "Hey, I have a mortgage on this house," or, there's a lot of things with fraud these days, but, you know, if the title company you hired or your attorney hired to do the job didn't do the perfect job, and you do have to make a title claim, you will look at your policy. I would say, 95% of people never look at their policy unless when they're selling, the new buyers might want for their own title company, for the new buyer, they might want to see the old policy. But, you know,
Is, is title insurance kind of more like title assurance, or is it an insurance policy that you're renewing regularly?
no, no, it's a one-time premium. So,
A one time.
it's there
It's
for as
kind
long
of
as
like
you
an assurance in a way.
it kinda you know what? It kinda is assurance. You're assuring the buyer that they do have good, clean, clear title to the property.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make that recommendation.
No,
I think
because when I think of insurance, I think of, oh, you have a premium every year, you have claims against it. Whereas you're
right,
saying, no, we are assuring you this at this point in time, there are absolutely no claims against your property and
right,
you are buying it free and clear.
right. No, that's right.
It's insurance to
I
me.
like that. You know what? You're making title insurance a fun thing.
How'd you come to title insurance, Michael?
Well, it's a little bit of a convoluted story. So my whole backstory, when I got out of business school in the 80s, I was a bond analyst and a bond trader for some of the biggest firms on Wall Street.
Hmm.
Then I stayed in bonds for a while. Then I became an equity trader, and then in about 2000, I opened up a commercial mortgage company,
Hmm.
and it was great. And we
Year
sold
would
our
that have been?
what's that?
What year would that have been?
It was about 2002.
Okay. So you were hitting all the exciting days leading up to 2008.
Yes, exactly. And then in 2008, uh, the crap hit the fan,
Yeah.
and we
That's a
sold our
curse
paper.
in my mind.
What's that again?
I said that's a curse year in my mind.
That was a bad year, no question about it. Yes. And, because my company sold paper to the collateralized mortgage backed securities market, that market went away and my company was no longer viable. My
Mhm.
wife was in a family business. They were hard money commercial, residential construction lenders. So
Mhm.
if a guy wanted to buy a house, my wife's company would take a first mortgage on the property and lend incrementally while they built the house. So it really didn't matter how good they were as a borrower as long as they had the collateral on the property. But in 2008, their warehouse bank pulled their line, and really they were in the worst part of the market in terms of quality and whatever. It was bad, and they went out of business along with a lot of our money. And we needed to reinvent quickly. I had two girls in college. I had my son who was on his way to college, and we both knew title. I knew it from I was a bond analyst of housing bonds, and for my wife, title insurance was critical, protecting their their security. They had the liens on that was their protection. So we started a title insurance company in 2008. A very difficult time to start a title company, without a doubt. We started with some of the smaller underwriters because the big underwriters who I insure with now, we're not looking to bring people on,
Right.
especially new companies. So you know what? It was a classic tale of, and I always quote the amygdala. I love quoting the amygdala, which is your fight or flight mechanism. And in 2008, you really didn't have a lot of choice. You could either curl up in a ball or you could fight. And with a family and obligations, and I've always been a little bit of a fighter, and we just put our heads to the grindstone, and
Hmm.
we persevered, and we've grown a good company.
Uh-huh.
So that is my entry into title insurance.
That's quite the story.
Yes, yes,
That's quite the story. Just out of curiosity, what do you think of the movie The Big Short?
I think those guys were very smart. So when I was an equity trader, you know, you I actually used to, you would short stocks and you would buy stocks, and I think they were very smart. They saw something that other people, the smartest people on Wall Street, didn't see, and I think it's listen, they got a lot of gain from a lot of people's pain, but that's the way markets work, right?
It's funny, during that time, I was in the market buying the lofts I have now. And, the market just kept going up and just beyond my reach. Every time I was like ready, and then someone else would come in and put a bid on the property. And I'm like, this is just crazy. I remember saying to my husband, this is going to crash. And he's like, well, why don't you short it? I'm like, well, I have no idea when it's going to crash, but I never could have hung in there for the pain.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I, I can predict when shorts might happen, but I could never hang in for the pain because I'm not a good timer on anything. If I buy a
Well,
new phone tomorrow, don't, you know, wait,
right.
wait,
Right,
because
right. I mean,
model coming out next week. So
well, you
time,
know what? Timing the market is very difficult, and, but, if you look at it today, like in my area where I live, prices just keep going up, even though it's gotten soft in other places, there's not a lot of inventory, so prices are staying very high, and I'm looking at the stock market today, there's a lot of angst in the world, you
Mhm.
know, and I analyze things a lot, but between our debt as a country, our deficits as a country, I don't know that interest rates are going to come down, but the stock market's up 900 points today. And
Yeah.
it's like, will we look back at some point and say, it was obvious? How could it keep going? So
Well,
it's
it's
hard.
interesting too with interest rates because when people say, oh, interest rates are so high,
Yeah.
I remember that in right before the stock market crashed in 1987, that January, that was October, that January, I bought a one-bedroom apartment and the interest rate was 12.9%.
Yep.
And people are like, "Oh, that's impossible." I'm like, "You kidding? You wanna know what cars we're leasing at?"
No
I used
question.
to, be in that industry. We're leasing cars at 24.99%, especially if someone had bad credit, because you could do it. You could take them all the way up to the usury law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I got out of undergrad in 1980,
Uh-huh.
which I guess is aging myself, but money market rates were 18%.
Yes.
You know, I mean, money market rates now are probably 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
and, you know, yeah, it is funny how, the last 10, 12, 15 years when, the Federal Reserve was keeping interest rates at 0, that's the normal. And
Yeah.
it's not, but that's a whole, that's why people who have 2 and 3% mortgages are not selling. That's why in
Yeah.
areas like mine, the market, there's no inventory because, you're gonna sell and then double your mortgage rate, and that's a
Mhm.
lot of money.
What's your prediction? Always fun to get predictions from people. Where do you see things going? We won't hold you to it because
Well,
I
it's a
established my predictions are horrible.
no, you know what? It's all good. Unfortunately, I don't have any problem predicting. I'm more than happy to do that. I don't see interest rates coming down.
Mhm.
Because, as a former bond, analyst, it's built on trust. Interest rates are built on trust. And, with the United States having 40 trillion in debt and $1 trillion deficit this year when supposedly the economy's doing well, I just think interest rates are destined to go higher. And, I think at some point the market is going to reflect that. The
Uh-huh.
fact that we have a war right now, oil prices are, I think crude is 92 today, and nobody seems to care.
Mm.
So, that kind of blase attitude, I think, is a contraindicator.
It's fascinating. Last night, um, I was at an event and I left with a friend and she said, do you want to go grab some dinner before we went home? And I said, sure. And do you know, we walked past 15 restaurants, maybe even 20, that we could not get a seat in any of them.
It's
And I
incredible.
looked around and I'm like, wow, it was so Wednesday night. And every restaurant, and we're not talking cheap tickets on the menu,
Oh, absolutely
in
not.
Greenwich the West Village, you're talking about pricey. menus.
Right. Yeah. Well, so just to throw one more statistic in there, if you look at credit card debt, I doubt any of those people were paying cash. And right
Mhm,
now, credit card debt is about 1.2 or 3 trillion at
mhm.
right now. So while consumer confidence remains high, I write articles as well. And I actually wrote an article recently, consumer confidence is strong, but who's paying? And
Mm.
the premise being that, consumer confidence can stay strong. They give you a lot of room on your credit cards, but at some point the piper has to get paid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell me
So
about the, articles you write. I didn't know this about you.
yeah, well, as a matter of fact, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, I used to write a blog.
Uh-huh.
And when blogs were big, it was called the Political Commentator, and I had about 5,000 readers a day. So when
Wow.
I was young, I used to write articles. I used to write letters to the editor because that was really the only way to voice your opinion. And
Yeah.
I do have a lot of opinions, and I find I need to expunge them, and writing kind of is cathartic. It
Yeah.
really.
That's why I write. I understand that. It lets me get it out. It lets me percolate what I'm working on either with myself or what I'm observing. It's very cathartic to me to write.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And, I stopped writing about politics because, starting a business, it's really not, especially where I am, it's not a great place to voice your politics necessarily. So, I write about.
Held for what I write. You survive. I've been
Oh,
canceled a couple
absolutely.
of times. Big time
Believe it,
cancels, like, losing 60,000 followers in less than 24 hours and still
really.
surviving. Oh, yeah.
Wow. What
Yeah.
was the topic that pushed them away?
I posted the American flag right after Trump was shot in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And I don't even know exactly what the symbolism is, but
I just, I will never understand it. I will
you-
never understand it except that and I'll never understand it. It's one of the things I'll
yeah,
die not
I-
fully understanding.
but I think,
That is, I hope we can all get it together.
well, you're right. I was going to say I could be wrong, but I think your premise was I'm proud to be an American,
Yeah.
and
Let's be that
whatever,
melting pot that we were
right,
built on, you
and
know?
whatever you think of a leader, you can't just go around killing them.
No,
It-
exactly.
It's
You know,
common sense.
I named my blog, which prior to that event, I mean, I had people that had followed me for 7 years, you know, would say, "You're the best thing online. You can give me peace. You're like free therapy," you know, and it was like, wow,
So,
I
so
can't
you
believe this is such a divisive thing
well,
that
I'm not going to say I believe in the term, but it sounds like you triggered them
yeah,
just
apparently.
by posting an American flag, which is kind of a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, I just love looking at that flag. That, it just says to me, I'm glad I'm born here. There are a lot of places you can be born in the world that wish they were born here. And it
Uh,
doesn't bother me to say that.
Good for you. And again, I don't like to be political, and I'm not going to be, but
I don't think that's being political. I think
why?
being just plain, this is a nice country. You could be born one of the X number of billion people born in a place that has no water or, no modern plumbing. That happens
Or,
still in this world.
or no freedom of speech, or no freedom of movement, or basically freedom. You could
You
be
know,
born in a place where you have no freedom.
and how I started my whole blog, how it became silver disobedience was one. Obviously, I have silver hair, but I thought
I didn't
I
even notice that.
I could see divisiveness, and I said, can't we have civil disagreement,
Right.
civil discussion, civil disobedience? So I played on the two words of
That's
silver
great.
hair and
I think
silver.
that's great.
Let's talk about anything. We don't
Right.
have to agree, but if we can't talk, we can't progress.
Unfortunately, the answer to your question is, can't we just get along? And the answer seems to be no. But hopefully, you know what? Hopefully, calmer heads prevail. But I don't see it. But in any event, so what do I write about? I write about, so the name of of where I write is called Hallmark Abstract Wonders, which is kind of a takeoff on my podcast. Do you ever wonder? And I write a lot about real estate because that's what I do. But I also write about other things. Like I just wrote something today because I had a guest on my podcast who invented or patented a way to make, and I find this fascinating, a bulletproof, stylish handbag. And to me, that's, you don't necessarily see the need for it, right?
Uh-huh.
But, in a world of unknowns where, if you're walking around an urban area or like, for instance, I wrote it, what if you're a real estate agent who is showing a house in a desolate area and you're alone and a stranger is coming to see the house? I'm a big believer. So I'm a big believer in security,
Mhm.
personal and country.
Mhm.
I find, but I wonder about those things. So that was an episode in an article.
That is
But
fascinating. A bulletproof pocketbook. I'm gonna look that up. That sounds pretty fascinating. That's quite the accessory.
absolutely, and it only weighs 17 ounces. So it's
Wow.
not like it's Kevlar. It's rated for a 357 Magnum, which, if you're a Dirty Harry fan,
Yeah. Well,
is the most powerful handgun in the world.
and did
I
how
don't know
many
if it's
shots
safe.
did I shoot, punk? I can't.
Right. That's right.
I love that scene. Best movie scene I
Classic.
think
You're
ever.
feeling lucky, punk? Right. That's great. But I don't know. I've had an ex-KGB agent on. I had twin sisters on who developed an app where it's a dating app based just on AI, where AI analyzes your face because apparently, in to them, the face is the portal to your soul. I guess it tells. So you don't even have to write I don't know how dating apps work, but you don't even have to write a biography, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just thought that was fascinating. You know what? I see people on TV, and if I find what they do interesting, I reach out to them and ask them if they want to be guests.
That's really what I do because I think it's so much fun. Like, we're having this conversation here, and I used to call it an interview, and then I changed it. No, it's really, and actually, when I declared them as conversations, I think that further accelerated the audience.
Because
Track.
they're not looking for an interview. I mean, I call it a discussion, but
Yeah,
it's a conversation back and forth. It kind of goes where it goes. It ebbs and the valleys and the rivers, and you follow it to some conclusion.
so
Will
where are we going next in this conversation? Because I have a feeling you have a lot to cover.
Well, let's see. I could cover my miserable childhood, but I don't think anyone wants to hear about that. I could
Did you
discuss
grow up?
I could discuss my kids because I'm extremely proud of them.
Well,
But
before we go to your kids, where did you grow up? Where
I
were
grew
you?
up on Long Island in a place called North Belmore.
I know North Belmar. I grew up in Huntington.
Oh, okay, that's
So you
great.
were South Shore, I was North Shore.
I was, and when I got married, I wanted to live on the South Shore, and my wife grew up in Jericho,
Oh,
and she
yeah.
wanted to live on the North Shore. So the way it works in Jewish families is you go where your wife wants to go.
Nice.
Yes.
So you've been on Long Island all these years, just different towns.
Well, we lived in Manhattan for a while. After I got out of business school, I lived in Manhattan, and then when my oldest daughter was ready for kindergarten, I mean, nursery school in 1994 in Manhattan was 8 grand.
Ugh,
Now I think it's 20 grand.
that's right.
So it was much better. And you know what? We moved. It took us a while to find a house, but we found a house on an acre of land. It's great. It's, I sit in my kitchen sometimes looking out the window and imagining that I never thought I would live in a house like that.
Mhm.
So I have I have a feeling of pride and I have a feeling of success. So
I
Y-
love hearing that
Well,
because I'm a big fan of other people and their achievements and their successes. And I was recently talking to someone who's, at the absolute top of the comedy game. And I said, "Do you ever stop and say, wow, you know, I'm here?" And he said, "Have you ever been able to do that?" And I said, "No, I try. I really try." And I try to remind other people of the same thing, to just stop and say, you really came a long way.
well, and I know that I know you. I think we may be running out of time, but I'm not sure. But what I always tell my kids is to have gratitude, and I'm not looking at. So I'm looking at success not so much from the standpoint of business. I look at my success as I actually look at my success as my kids.
Hmm.
When like, I didn't have a great childhood, and I swore when I had kids, my kids would have the opposite childhood to what I had.
Hmm.
And I I can say with some certainty that I think they did,
Hmm.
and that is all the success I need. It actually makes me a little misty-eyed.
I can understand that.
Yeah,
I can understand that.
yeah. So, I mean, we could talk. I've been to many an analyst. We could talk for a while on my issues, I'm a big believer in gratitude. I try and take my kids every year. We go to a soup kitchen and we serve and we prepare just so that they understand. You look outside and there's a line around the block, and I think the problem is gratitude is not practiced very often in many areas. And instead of always looking up, we should look down. We should look to those as not as fortunate and try and help them.
You remind me of a story when one of our children was in school, and I had gotten, "Mom, everyone's going to South America to do this, thing, and the trip only costs blank." Right. And I said, "You know what? The church has a major soup kitchen and they need people to make food." And I got, "But that's not the same." I'm like, "Yeah, right. You're going to get the same story I got from my mother.
Right.
Charity begins in your own backyard. So start in your own backyard. You don't need to fly to another country for a
Right.
mega hit to go do a good deed when you can walk around anywhere and find those opportunities if you want to see them."
100%. You know
Yeah.
what? I always try and lead by example for my kids. So I try and do a lot of charitable work. I'm the board chair of a combat veteran charity, which we work with vets at risk of suicide. Who you
Oh,
familiar with moral injury?
yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of vets come home suffering
Yeah.
moral injury, and
Exactly.
you know they they have a high suicide rate, and the motto is from suicidal ideation to community reintegration. That's a good, right?
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow. And what a great thing to be doing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
So
needed.
it's, I mean, you see, mine's called Heroes to Heroes Foundation, but if you watch Tunnel to Towers commercials,
Hmm.
on Long Island, there's a huge veteran homelessness problem,
Yeah.
and less than 1% of Americans serve, and they're a vastly underserved
Yeah.
constituency who have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, you can hit me up because frankly, that's the area I donate. I donate to the local New York City public schools and to veterans. And
Yeah.
when people say I'm doing this in this country, I'm like, you know what? That's not in my quadrant. These are
Well,
the
like
two
you said,
areas.
charity begins at home.
Yeah. And I have quite a few military members in my family, and I'd have been kicked out day one, or wouldn't have lasted. Because I couldn't have handled it. I couldn't have handled what so many of these guys have done.
So, did anyone in your family serve in combat?
Yeah.
And did
Yeah. My
you?
brother in law's Vice Admiral of the United States Navy, retired.
Wow.
So four-star admiral, and my nephew just retired as a Top Gun pilot and instructor. And
Wow.
now he's flying for United cross Atlantic. And my
Wow.
brother was also um in the
God
army.
bless. Wow. That's
So
very highly accomplished.
merchant marine and in the Navy.
Wow. I
So
actually interviewed a guy on my podcast who was a fighter pilot, and growing up, he had a problem with claustrophobia, and he overcame claustrophobia and became a Top Gun,
yeah,
which is incredible.
it is incredible.
Well,
It is
thank your
incredible.
family for your service. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I say. And on his retirement, which was about a year ago, for my nephew, who's also my godson, when I went down there and I looked at his, you know, I think it was I don't remember if it was the F-18 or the F-35, because his final flight was the F-35, which was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Right.
As it hovers and then slowly comes down.
Incredible. Incredible.
Wild. But you see the bullet holes that they leave in the
Wow.
F-18s. They make sure they're not damaging anything, but the
Right, right.
outside, they leave it. And his had 85.
That's incredible.
Like,
That
now, you don't always, he explains, the same person doesn't always fly the exact same plane, so he can't, quote, take credit for all 85. But I'm like, yeah, but if we
Yep.
cost average, or average out all these planes, they all have a lot of holes in them.
It's incredible.
It's like, oh my gosh.
And then I was seeing something when they have to eject, if they have to eject, I think the G forces are like some colossal number, like 20 Gs. I mean, just like w- I was up in I did a thing one time called the Marine Corps Executive Forum, where if you never served, you apply, and then you go down to Quantico and spend a day like a Marine. And I got to go up in an Osprey, which is
Yeah.
at a time when I think a lot of them were going down, were crashing, and they pulled like I think about 3 Gs where, they, like, went straight up and then went straight down, and I cannot and I looked down 'cause I was holding the guy next to me's knee. It was, like, unbelievable, and these guys deal with that all the time. It's God bless. God bless.
Well, oh
Unbelievable.
my gosh, Michael, we clearly can keep
We
talking for another hour, but
well, we did meander a little.
this is all good. This is a
I
great conversation. So
absolutely.
I want to thank you very much for joining me. I've been speaking with Michael Haltman. He's Hallmark Abstract Title Insurance, somebody you definitely want to reach out to if you're buying a home and you want to make sure you're actually buying that home
That's right.
without any problems.
That's right. That's right. You buy, we protect.
Well, there will be all kinds of links to Michael below. I'm Dian Griesel. This has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. I would really like you to hit subscribe, like so many of you are doing, and I can't even tell you how excited I am with how these numbers are going up. So I appreciate that you guys are enjoying these conversations as much as I am, because I just truly think I get the coolest guests and have the best conversations, and Michael's an example of that. So thank you for joining me again, Michael.
Thank you.
There will be all kinds of links so you can follow Michael below. And again, hit subscribe and see you next time. Hang in there, Michael. We're going forward.